and I found myself in some sort of bizarre alternate reality. And I didn't notice until 3:30 today when I got to my dentist appointment, and it was just a different dentist. Like, the sign out front was different, and I walked in, and it was the same receptionist, but then the actual dentist was just not my normal dentist. I don't know what happened there. It was very bizarre. Um, kind of still struggling to cope. Really interfered with my power process. No, you know what really interfered with my power process?
Oh, Jesus.
So I left the office like right when the schools get out. I think is what was going on. It was like 3:30. Well, yeah, I left at like 3:30. Um, and my office is like right next to a school. So there were cars like all down the street, and then on like both sides up and down the intersection, just like all the way down, just hanging out, just waiting. Everyone trying to make a turn to get into the school. And I thought there was like an accident in the intersection or something. But no, I just got in the other lane and just went past like 100 cars, just hanging out.
The urbanism of Melbourne.
Yeah. Thank fucking God I didn't
I
get
don't-
stuck at that light. Or
It's
actually
not
had to
a
wait.
well-made city. What happened to the Great American City?
Never existed.
I thought Robert Moses demolished it all.
Yeah, well, that's the real answer. It's just sort of fun just to deny everything, like Ted here, and just start making stuff up.
Oh
New
man.
York City.
It's
that was
easier
great.
just to say America was never good.
This fucking Ted, man. Hang on, let me read the disclaimer before we get into this.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't, I don't know
Don't
if
get
we'll actually
sued.
need it this time because I don't have anything good to say about Uncle Ted this episode. Oh boy.
We
Theodore
finally-
Kaczynski is a convicted terrorist serving a life sentence. His violent actions should not be emulated or replicated. Do not mail bombs. Any praise of Kaczynski, his actions, or his works are purely satirical. Also, he's a dweeb who smelled like spoiled milk. I'm your host, the IAA's #1 virtual idol and controversial mathematics professor, Kaczynski Yuna. I was
Canonically a
excited
virgin
for
who
this
smelled
part
bad.
because I was like, oh man, Ted's finally gonna like here's
Get
his
into it.
he's gonna really get into it because you read the title, The Nature of Freedom. Okay, that part's boring, and so is some principles of history, but then industrial technological society cannot be reformed. I was like, yeah, tell him, Ted. And you know what he did? Nothing. He didn't tell him. He didn't tell him shit.
He's like, we're gonna argue this, and then he doesn't really.
He doesn't argue it. He just says it. He just says it.
That's it. That's the essay.
What's up, bookers? I see I remembered.
Well done.
Oh, hang on. I'm going to actually remember to put that at the start of my intro that I have typed up. What's up, bookers? I keep, like, meaning to put it in there so I don't forget and then forgetting. That's... Truly, I am a mess. It's
Right
just...
at the top of your script, remember to write new thing at the top of your script.
it's because I'm over-socialized.
Clearly.
So,
Under medicated.
one of the two. Both, perhaps. Yeah. So, Nature of Freedom is just, like, incredibly boring. He just says some stuff.
Did this really need a dedicated paragraph?
No.
Like,
You mean
first of all, it's just a
5,
single sentence
6
by
paragraphs? It's long. These are some beefy paragraphs to say very little.
That's it. That's the essay.
Yeah.
Gotta pad out that runtime.
Yeah. He's got to hit the word count. I mean, it does start off like...
That was how he backed up his threat to get the manifesto published. It was one nail in the bomb for every word.
The first sentence of paragraph 93 is, like, worth saying, at least. we are going to argue that industrial technological society cannot be reformed in such a way as to prevent it from progressively narrowing the sphere of human freedom. I read that. I'm like, all right, great. Looking forward to hearing your argument, Ted.
So that's
Oh.
why he mailed out.
This for this section.
He didn't argue it.
Yeah.
And then he's like,
Defines
but
freedom.
because freedom is a word that can be interpreted in many ways, we must first make clear what freedom we are concerned with. Spoiler alert, he didn't really make it clear. He kind of rambled for a bit. I mean, I get what he's saying, but I was not convinced even to accept his definition of freedom.
Mhm.
By
His
freedom,
definition of freedom.
yeah, by freedom, we mean the opportunity to go through the power process with real goals, not the artificial goals of surrogate activities, and without interference, manipulation, or supervision from anyone, especially from any large organization.
When has this ever been true?
The pioneers, in Ted's mind. I don't know.
Pioneers used to ride this power process for miles.
It's
Freedom.
the thought process, which he thinks is an automatic thing that we are psychologically compelled to go on, irregardless of all other traits. Like we just roll our stats and to see how well we do at
I don't know.
going down this railroad track of the power process.
He's
and
saying
that's
freedom. He's saying freedom isn't something that we're allowed to do. It's something that we can do and we can't be stopped to do, right?
I mean, he's saying that it's some. So this just comes back to the power process. That's his actual focus. It's all about the power process, which is having goals and then accomplishing those goals, but not
he's
too
saying
easily, and
freedom
not
doesn't
because
matter.
anyone else told you to. If anyone else tells you, it doesn't count.
He's right.
Well, maybe about the power process, but he then makes some pretty impressive leaps to conclusions based off of that. Freedom means being in control, either as an individual or as a member of a small group. He does not define small. Small. It's his definitions are very circular. Like a small group is one small enough to not interfere with your power process.
Well, let's
Anything
assume I've
bigger?
never gone through the power process, Ted. Like
Yeah,
you went
hold
through
my
it, I
hand.
know.
Walk me through it. What does your power
Oh,
process
cool.
look like? I guess it involves mailing 17 bombs.
Is that a small amount of bombs? What is small, Ted?
Well, clearly the unit that does not impede your power process is at least one, because no, at least two, because he had his brother, and his brother did not stop him from mailing bombs.
Well, his brother didn't know
his
he was
brother didn't
mailing
know.
bombs.
He wasn't living
His
with
brother
brother.
knew that he was a crank living in the woods, but didn't know he was mailing bombs until so after the after
They actually posted this.
yeah, after the 17 bombs, Ted sent in a letter that was like, publish my manifesto or I will mail another bomb. And they were like, no, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
So he mailed another bomb.
And he did not. No, because Hustler, Mr. Hustler was like, shit, we'll fucking mail it. We got room in between the piss special this month. And so they put a letter in the news that was like, Dear Mr. Unabomber, Hustler has agreed to publish your manifesto. And he mailed a letter to the media that was like, because Hustler is not a respectable publication, I reserve the right to mail one small bomb if you publish it in Hustler. I think it was Hustler. It was either Hustler or Penthouse. I'm pretty
think
sure it was Hustler.
This sounds like a Hustler thing. That's the thing. A lot of people don't know that technically speaking, all the nudie magazines were required to have things that are not porn in
Yeah.
order to be legally sold.
I hear Penthouse had like actually good articles and short
Yes.
stories.
Yeah, so did
It did.
Playboy. That's why I read Playboy for the articles was so funny. A, no, you're not. But B, technically you could.
But not Hustler.
Yeah, and,
not
and,
Hustler.
And because of it, like Larry Flint, the owner of Hustler, became like the number one free speech defender. And like he took a bullet for free speech when like some like right wing crank shot him and put him in a wheelchair
Oh, jeez.
Based.
because he was like, I refuse to not publish hardcore pornography.
He became. Why does that sound like the origin of a Metal Gear villain?
I think it was.
So that would be not Die Hard, man.
Die
talk-
soft, man.
Can we talk about how the Hustler guy has done more to better American journalism than Rupert Murdoch?
I've done more to better American journalism than Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah,
I
he
haven't
did
done fuck
actively
all.
Make it worse.
Wait, isn't Rupert Murdoch like Australian?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. That's why he's not.
That's why he does it. He's trying to weaken America as a major world power so he can take over with his army of emus.
Well, he also ruined Australia's media, though.
Yes.
Yeah, he did. That was his trial run.
Yeah.
Well,
Then
let's focus on this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so the,
Ted
the
gets
We
paragraph
can save
95.
discussion of Murdoch for the post.
well, there is one
discussion,
actual
which is-
important. The only actual important takeaway from this entire section is this next line of 94. One does not have freedom if anyone else has power over one, no matter how benevolently, tolerantly, and permissively that power may be exercised. Basically, if you think you're free, but someone could decide to make you not free, you're not free. Even though you're literally free,
He's
that
got a point
freedom
there.
doesn't count because it could be revoked.
By that
he's
definition,
got a point there.
freedom literally cannot exist, and the definition is you.
Unless you
Well-
live alone in the woods, and if
Right.
anyone else shows up, you stab them with your pointy stick until they go away.
Well, the thing
I was
is,
gonna
other
say that.
people did show up.
That is kind.
So
That is
clearly
kind
he
of.
wasn't.
That is
Pretty
kind of
free.
his point.
Well,
Paul.
you face those other
can't
people with
be freedom, you
proud
can't be
stoicism, and then it counts. It's like it's a purely psychological thing. Like if you believe you're free, you're not free, unless you are Ted. And when Ted believes he's free, then you're free. If Ted believes that you are free, you are free.
Because he's
I'm not
based
here to
in you're a soy society liver.
Exactly.
I am not
even-
here to defend Mr. Unabomber, but I think this is at least internally consistent because the whole point of this exercise is that yes, freedom is impossible.
Yes. Okay. So I
because
do
of
not I do
techno-industrial
not agree with
society.
what he's saying, but at the very least,
I do.
he has made it clear
Hey, Paul.
what his psychology is.
Sneezed. That's what.
Based-
It's internally consistent. He just comes to the wrong conclusions.
Well, I
And
wouldn't
also
call it
he's-
internally consistent because his conclusion is male bombs. And I haven't. Maybe he gets to that later, but I haven't seen quite how those connect.
Yeah.
I believe it connects because when your viewpoint like this is so rigid, it's like it's similar to like the rigidity of the sort of ideology of fascism. Like it's so rigid and unbending that in order to maintain it, you have to maintain it violently because it can't bend because it would break under any pressure, right? Like Ed's freedom was broken by men showing up wearing cool windbreakers.
and not getting.
Remember,
rolled
his
on the-
only actual complaint against society is that he wanted to purchase a nice plot of land in Canada, but because he was a Canadian citizen, he was not a Canadian citizen, he had to apply for it, and they rejected his application. So he had to
Spelled by
he
soy
had to get his
milk.
parents to buy him a plot of land in Montana instead. That's his objection. That's the only time society has actually wronged him.
Those bastards.
Like he
Another
doesn't.
thing to blame on the Canadians.
Yeah, he doesn't have any
Residency
actual
schools,
objections.
Number 1, number 2, tar sands, number 3, Ted Kaczynski.
He was not oppressed. He was not homeless. He was not subjected to terrifying ordeals. No. He volunteered for a program that, was MK Ultra, but he chose to remain in it. He could have left, but he did not. So don't you be blaming that for this shit. He has no excuse. He's just a fucking pussy. So 95. Our freedom isn't real. Ted has decided that we are not free enough.
Right.
It is said that we live in a free society because we have a certain number of constitutionally guaranteed rights. But these are not as important as they seem. The degree of personal freedom that exists in society is determined more by the economic and technological structure of the society than by its laws or its form of government. Most of the Indian nations of New England were monarchies, and many of the cities of the Italian Renaissance were controlled by dictators. I get what he's saying, but it really is. It's like,
No, he's
Ethan
absolutely
is
right
not
in
a
this paragraph.
monarch.
well, he's
and
right,
the
but
Medici's
Ted,
aren't
you're
technically dictators
you're
in
missing
the
like an
modern
extra
sense.
sentence to say what this means.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what he's saying. It's not the nature of the government that determines the freedom, because he does actually get into this. In part,
we're
this was
required to
because
have a
they
job.
lacked efficient mechanisms for enforcing the ruler's will. There were no modern, well-organized police forces, no rapid long-distance communications, no surveillance cameras, no dossiers of information about the lives of average citizens. Hence, it was relatively easy to evade control. It's like,
this is true in the
kind
sense like
of
yes,
true.
you can just sort of leave your town and just fuck off wherever as an outlaw.
but like, modern society is not free, unlike old society, because our police are better at policing. Like, they police harder.
Yeah.
Is like,
I mean, that's not. This is sort of a sideways way of looking at it. I mean, Foucault was kind of arguing a point that's in the same ballpark as Ted's here, in the evolution of like the prison state.
Yeah, I think Ted is just being more literal about it, though.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's not the nature of the nature of the system of social punishment has changed. It's just they got better at it.
Al, you should like put some tags in the stream thing.
I'm
so
not
people
putting
can
tags in the stream description.
You gotta put VTuber and neurodivergent.
No, I don't.
Unabomber.
It'll help you find more viewers.
I don't want viewers. Viewers, if you're watching this, go away.
Also, someone here is not watching. We're only at 3 viewers.
Oh yeah, I forgot to open it.
I'm gonna open the chat just in case.
And then he tries to tie it to an example for freedom of the press. Which,
Oh,
like, he
this
does-
shit. This
he
literally
goes off
comes
on the
off
ma-
as the
on the
most
mainstream
pathetic
media.
whining I have ever heard. Freedom of press doesn't count as real freedom because no one would read my manifesto until I mailed bombs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right.
I mean, he's right, but that's only because he's such a bad writer. Plenty of other people have written things and gotten them to be read. Like, shit, dude. Like, Marx got his shit published.
Yeah, like loads
did,
of
and he used
ideologues got their words out there.
Yeah.
You're just bad at writing.
Well, here's the thing, right? Imagine Ted, like, instead of spending his time mailing bombs, instead became a decent writer, conveyed the same sort of ideas, just more eloquently and just coherently. Like, he could have become, like, the guy that edgy high schoolers look up to.
Well,
Still wouldn't
Oh,
have
he
as
did
many
do
people
that.
reading his
edgy high
literature.
schoolers do still look up to him.
But the timetable on that
But he
one was a
wouldn't
lot
But
longer.
kill
definitely, yeah,
No, but still, he would still
definitely.
have a lot less readers if he did that.
I
I would
The problem is,
question that
because
point.
of what he did,
Like-
everyone goes into this as, hey, this is the thing that the crazy guy who lived in the woods and mailed bombs wrote.
Yeah, more people may read it, but no one agrees with it.
Yeah,
No
but
one
it doesn't
takes it
matter if they agree with it.
seriously.
It's freedom if someone reads it.
Freedom is when other
Oh
people
my god,
read
are we
posts,
fulfilling
and the
Ted's
more
power
posts I
process
read-
by reading the manifesto?
Yes, this is what he wants.
This is why I've made this, like, I've tried to
does terror-
un-Ted it as much as possible by becoming a virtual anime girl and
Thus
reading
we
it.
know, and thus we know his tactics worked. Disclaimer: that was a joke. Satire, not actionable parody in Minecraft. Please do not mail bombs.
Do it. I do like the idea every freedom is when people are listening to me is an incredible take.
He was way ahead of his time. Because
If we had never done
That's
anything
effectively-
violent and had
Even-
submitted the present writings to a publisher, they probably would not have been accepted. Ted, you just like what is that reflects on you as a writer, not on
Ted,
the
you're not
media.
wrong.
If he wrote
Let
a
me
regular
tell
piece
you
of
what.
media, people will read it, then they'll just forget about it afterwards, right? There's no reason for it to last.
Not if he actually wrote it well.
Yeah, but who's gonna go back to it in a month or two?
People do actually read things and then go to discourse. Quick, Brandon, name an author who has read a thing or has written a thing that people have read and care about.
That's fuck. I'm gonna go with an old author and
All
go
right.
fucking Homer.
There you go.
People are still having hot takes about the
Yeah, see-
Odyssey.
Back then, they had more freedom.
Okay, so that's actually I'm so glad you mentioned that, because
Killed by the Persians at the Gap.
it is so hard for me to actually like pin down what Ted like wants, because the ancient Greeks had effectively an industrial society. They didn't literally have like factories because they didn't have electricity, but like they did large scale agriculture and craft, and had
A society.
a society that in many ways resembled our own. And they
Greeks were
existed
society livers.
they existed
Yeah.
at the same time as the Native Americans. So when Ted says reject modernity, embrace tradition, it's hard to figure out which tradition he's talking about. Because I mean, even like the ancient Sumerians had structured society, right? Like the
Even-
Babylonians 8,000 years
Even,
ago.
Even old North American tribes, which were more decentralized than their Central and South American counterparts, they still had a fairly complex confederacy and treaty system. Even the ones who like weren't part of the Mississippi Mound civilization, like there were still like huge swaths of land where like where they had complex trade arrangements.
Which is why I feel like
They were just lost to history because they didn't have a system of writing. And when the Europeans first came to America, they just simply ignored that it happened in order to fit the narrative. These were just savages.
yeah, Ted just doesn't know a lot about history, and it shows. He's not a historian.
And it shows.
Yeah, he's a
Which
mathematician.
is like
Yeah,
fine,
he's a mathematician,
technically.
and he tries to write his sociology argument as a mathematic proof. But the difference is that in math, you can just say things and then say a thing that follows from those things, and it's you're done. With like humanities, you have to actually argue the point in a way that convinces people, and he is awful at that. Which is why he had the mail bombs, and even then, no one like this did not actually start a movement.
Especially because, like, anyone who could have wanted to ally with him, he denounces outright.
Oh, yeah. He even we'll get into that. He lists like a bunch of other people that are losers, and it's like, Ted, these are the guys that would agree with you.
These are your friends.
97. He's
It's
like
a nightmare.
don't even waste your time trying to read this. He's just like, here is some things that other people have said is the definition of free. They're wrong. Only my definition of free is correct. The trouble with such theorists is that they have made the development and application of social theories their surrogate activity. They don't count because they're only saying these things to fulfill their power process.
What a
Wish my
take.
brain was this big.
His
a
brain is so smooth.
How are they able to get him out of that cabin with a brain that big?
How'd he get his
No,
head
so,
through the
see,
door?
he's saying other people, with their freedom, they had to use it to better society, but that's not freedom if you have to use it for someone else.
It's true. Yeah, it's.
Massive Ted Kaczynski egotist confirmed.
I mean, okay, definitely you could disagree with like the Maoist view of freedom. I'm not saying that I'm not saying these people are correct. I'm not saying everyone he disagrees with is correct. I'm just saying, like,
No
Reason
balls.
for disagreeing with them.
you have not made a
Poorly
good
explained.
argument here.
Yeah, and he tries to denounce the bourgeois revolutions, which is like, okay, but you said you hated the leftists, but this is a very leftist framework of
Well,
denouncing bourgeois revolution, so make up your goddamn
But
mind.
he also disagrees with the socialists. So
He's right, though.
he disagrees with everyone. He disagrees with everyone that isn't himself. It like normally
He didn't nail any bombs to himself.
when you've
You
got
have
an
a mailbox.
ideology, you look for people with similar ideologies and form a coalition to advance your argument collectively. But Ted's like, no, because collectivism is bad. You just be alone and you alienate everyone that would ever be sympathetic to your argument by living in the woods, mailing bombs, and smelling like milk. 98. This is another like bold claim. It should not be assumed that a person has enough freedom just because he says he has enough. You hear that? Just because you are happy and satisfied with your life as it is doesn't mean you're actually happy.
I agree.
You're just socialized into
Or-
thinking you're happy when you're actually not. So
Everyone is
everyone that
brainwashed
says
except for me.
everyone that says but Ted, I'm already satisfied with my life. He's like, wrong. You're a fool.
He's right though.
Is he?
True.
Yeah.
Are you just gonna say that
You don't
after
know what's
every
better
paragraph
if you
we go
have
over?
what's good for you. How are you gonna know what's better?
We're all.
How do I know this isn't going to be
wrapped
worse?
Behind the North
See, like-
Korea of the steam engine.
Satisfaction stops improvement.
Yeah, but like his whole argument here is that no one is free enough because I have decided that they need to be more free. For example, it's likely that many leftists of the over-socialized type would say that most people, including themselves, are socialized too little rather than too much. Would they? Any leftists here wanna weigh in on how over or under socialized we are?
I say.
I guess if you like squint at it, solidarity is technically a form of socialization.
Like-
Which, yes, I suppose we are lacking solidarity.
like, go back to
No,
the
but
part
he's saying we have, it's just. Yet the
You know what?
over-socialized
Okay.
leftist pays a heavy psychological price for his high level of socialization.
It just no. I tried reading that and I'm like, what are you on about?
I can't read that part, but the part above that makes more sense. The freedom is restricted part.
Yeah, kind of, but
He's absolutely right. Our idea of freedom is what our society has said it was freedom.
that is true. But he like.
But then he goes after every other possible definition of freedom. So it's like not like the straw man definition of freedom where like we have in America where like freedom is when you can get the McDouble for 99 cents.
Not freedom, okay.
No, but you have you have the ability to get it, and that's freedom. Freedom is consumption, and consumption is freedom. Like in the sort of like comedic, like clownish parody of like American freedom, or like in like the North Korean sense, where freedom is when you submit to your leader. But
The
he's
freedom
just
to
sitting there going,
labor for the greater good.
Yes, freedom to print $100 bills.
But I feel like it's impossible to say you think you're happy, but you're not actually happy. Because if you're happy, you're just happy.
I think so. To what Paul's saying here, like, sure, it is possible for someone to think they are free and not actually be free, just because they were like conditioned to feel that way.
Yeah, it's like the thing
The
with the
thing
shadow
is-
on the wall.
Shut up. Thing is,
You're calling it that just to make someone try and correct you.
it's not actually the case, and Ted here doesn't actually show like why we aren't actually free.
If you are happy with the amount of freedom that you have, then you don't need any more freedom because you're already happy. If you're not
do need
happy
more
with the
freedom.
amount of freedom you have, then you do need more freedom. Or, I don't know, you just need to be happier. Maybe
Our
watch
freedom should be
VTubers.
limited.
Yeah, that's
like,
Ted's problem. He didn't have enough VTubers.
That's
Yeah,
I
like-
want to
like-
tell
like-
Ted about VTubers. I think
like
he'd
Ted
like
is
them.
positioning his argument as like the sort of like bold truth telling that will make the scales fall from our eyes and see the truth, but he doesn't like he just postures his argument as that and doesn't actually say anything.
Yeah, it's like, okay, Ted, we're not actually free.
okay,
What would true freedom look like?
doing the power process. Okay,
Being
I
unlimited.
really feel like this whole thing would benefit from like 5 paragraphs at the beginning where he just gives examples of
definitions.
where he actually just gives examples of all the societies, or I guess not societies, all the peoples that were cool and based. He alludes to it throughout, like the Native Americans, the pioneers, but it's so nebulous like what he's actually advocating for.
I don't
And,
think
like-
any society has ever experienced true freedom.
That even if you want to agree with him, you don't know what to agree with. I mean, I expect that he'll get to it later on, but we're like halfway through, and we're still like, Ted, what do you want? The fact that we don't know, besides some sort of general abolish
The power
society,
process.
return
Yeah,
to
the
power
power
process.
process. Which is somehow an automatic process that will just go through on our own if we weren't interfered with constantly. Which
But
again,
we have to work for.
but yet we have to struggle for it. Which basically he's solved the humanity problem by simply declaring that we are all robots that are slave to this innate power process, which is a profoundly like fatalistic view of everything, but like to a straw man level.
So now we get
not
into
Ugh.
now we
The
get
history
into
principles.
Ted's principles of history, in which he tries to talk about
Wild.
history as if they're like mathematic axioms.
Fucking STEM bros coming into the humanities thinking you can solve it with logarithms.
This made me mad. Yeah, this is just bad. It's just poorly argued, and
Yes.
if this forms such an important like premise, or this forms the premise for such an important conclusion, that he really oughta tried a little bit harder with this one. Principle number 1. Small changes don't matter because either they go away on their own or they were part of a larger trend that would have happened anyway. And he doesn't give any
Can we lower Paul's volume every single time he says he's right?
He doesn't
Mike, got his mic.
he doesn't actually give like a real example. That's the problem. He gives a hypothetical example. But if you want to talk history and if you want to fucking talk about history, you got to talk about history. You got to actually say a thing that happened.
Like,
Exactly.
the one thing
History
that
has
changed-
happened.
like,
And
the
if-
small-
If
big
this
thing was, like,
happens
Magna
as
Carta.
much as if this is true in all cases the way he presents it, he should have no trouble giving an actual example.
No, see, like,
What counts as a small change?
I don't know. I was talking about this earlier, and this whole thing boils down to small changes don't count because they'll either not work or they were going to happen anyway. And
Where
so-
they'll
and real
inevitably
changes-
be undone by a small change in the
Yes.
other direction.
yeah, see, you
and
got to
real
go big changes.
and real changes are impossible, which is basically he is denied the entirety of history.
Yeah, so
Wait, where you say that's impossible? Real changes are impossible?
it's basically
third and-
we'll get to that. I'll-
third and
let me
fourth.
let me walk through it. So
Okay.
principle
Sorry,
1.
small changes.
Small changes don't count. They don't count as changes. Principle 2.
I like how also, hang on, before you go on to principle 2, in 101, he basically just like admits that the first principle is just bullshit. The
If
first
it's,
principle is almost a tautology. Either a change is small enough that it doesn't matter, or big enough that it would have happened anyway. It's just like, okay, so what?
No, he's saying is that if we know what a change is gonna do, then it's gonna be a small change and it can be easily undone or something like that.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, which is
So,
looking at
Big
history.
change-
principle
you can't
2.
predict a big change.
Any change that is big enough to be permanent will affect other parts of society too. Which, okay, this I do agree with. Society's
that's
got a
true.
lot of interconnected moving parts, and any big change is going to affect society as a whole. If it doesn't affect society as a whole, it's not a big change.
Yeah.
Number 3. Any change big enough to be permanent will have consequences that are impossible to predict. This is like mostly true. I mean, you can look at case studies all you want and get an idea of what's going to happen if it's something that's already happened to other similar societies. But yeah, generally speaking, there are going to be lots of side effects. And
Right.
I mean, you
And
can
in the
speculate
moment-
all you want, but you can never be sure.
Yeah, but that's also true of like just living in the present. Like you cannot
That's
have
just
hindsight.
that's literally like the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Not just society, but like anything. Any big change to anything in the real world can have consequences that you cannot anticipate.
Fourth one I hate.
This is a new kind of society cannot be designed on paper. So this is like basically
Whatever, fuck it. No anti-utopian.
4
shit. I'm
basically
fine with
comes
that.
out of 3, and that he's saying like, because in order to make a new kind of
Sure,
society,
you can't predict everything that your new society would be structured. I do agree with that, but like saying that it's just useless to think of how a society could function.
that's the problem. His conclusion is, therefore, any attempt to reform society is futile and you shouldn't bother. Principle 5, I don't even know what he's like, why he's bringing this up. People do not consciously and rationally choose the form of their society. They just happen. Society's just a thing that happens.
Your vibes.
I feel like this is only true because, like, not enough people consciously, and there's not enough praxis. Basically, that's the problem. You totally could consciously and rationally choose the form of your society, but not enough people want to, or are capable of, or, like, are educated enough.
Alternatively, not enough people agree.
Yeah, oh, that's the other thing. Yeah,
Because not everyone in a society can agree on what society should be. It's just going to be sort of an amalgamation of like whatever is most effective at maintaining itself.
Which
yeah,
feels
they're
me
just
like
going to
in-
they're
in
going to
the-
reach some sort of equilibrium effectively,
Mhm.
and vibe in the middle. And usually no one will be happy. And then by first principle. Don't ever fucking say by first principle in
in humanities writing.
in a
you don't do
humanities
that.
writing, yeah.
There are no first principles of humanity because, like, yeah. Sure,
Oh
Ted's
wait,
right.
okay, no, hold on.
We
He's
are-
talking about his
Yeah,
first
yeah. I
principle
just
here.
realized when he says he doesn't mean first principles. He means my principle number 1.
Yes.
by first principle as listed in paragraph 100.
So this
But
is
this thing I just
this is
made
his.
up.
This is worth reading in its entirety because this is the closest he comes to actually laying out his argument. By principle number 1, any attempt at social reform either acts in the direction in which society is developing anyway, so it just makes an inevitable change happen faster, or it has a transitory effect because the trend is in the opposite direction and it just gets undone. To make a lasting change in the direction of development of any important aspect of society, reform is insufficient and revolution is required. Because reform is either impossible or futile, or like insignificant. By the second principle, a revolution never changes only one aspect of a society. It changes the whole society. And by the third principle, changes occur that were never expected or desired by the revolutionaries. By the fourth principle, when revolutionaries or utopians set up a new kind of society, it never works out as planned. So his argument is that reform isn't enough. You need a revolution. Revolutions have unexpected and undesired consequences. Therefore, you shouldn't bother trying.
You can't solve all the externalities, so just lie on your front lawn and wait for the worms to take you.
Thing is, he didn't. It would have been fine if he did. He mailed bombs instead.
He's-
He advocated for
Did-
revolution.
Yeah, that's the other fucking thing. He literally, he fucking at the beginning.
Uh-oh.
We therefore advocate a revolution against the industrial system.
Hey, why are
But-
you saying revolution's bad?
But Ted, that's what he just said in 108.
It's
don't work.
beautiful
Also,
stuff.
I want a revolution.
Therefore, okay,
When
so
revolution,
defeat-
so when
Packet in,
well, he
boys.
does say
He's
when
hypocritical,
revolutionaries
you don't
set
have
up
to
a
interrogate
new
this
kind of
further.
society. So revolutions are okay so long as the goal is not to make a new society.
Why is he saying that?
When revolutionaries or utopians set up a new kind of society, it never works out as planned.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying no more society.
Yeah.
No, he's
I-
saying when revolution happens, we can't predict what's gonna happen.
Which is why he then says, don't bother with real revolution. Don't try and revolt against society. Like,
oh, you
don't.
say it later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't. Like. You can't just do a revolution to society. You have to do a revolution against society. And then this 109 is just. This is it's such a stupid take.
Also factually incorrect in several places, but that's besides the point.
The American Revolution was not a revolution in our sense of the word. Who is our? You mean yours, Ted, right? Like,
Yeah, I
you
think
mean
so,
my.
the Royal Hour.
You mean the Freedom Club. But a war of independence, followed by rather far-reaching political reform. The Founding Fathers did not change the direction of development of American society, nor did they aspire to do so. They only
Would love a
freed the
citation
development
there.
of American society from the retarding the retarding effect of British rule.
It's correct, though.
He's right.
He is right. Their political reform did not change any basic trend, but only pushed American political culture along its natural direction of development. So this is like wrong.
Yes.
Very wrong.
Oh no, he's
It
right.
was not certain that the American Revolution would succeed.
British
when it was
society,
happening.
of which American society was an offshoot, had been moving for a long time in the direction of representative democracy. Kind of, they hadn't really gotten very far.
They still haven't gotten very far. They have half of their elected body is unelected.
And prior to the War of Independence, the Americans were already practicing a significant degree of representative democracy in the colonial assemblies. True. But I would argue that that in itself was part of the revolution. Sure, it wasn't part of the Revolutionary War, but by becoming a democracy, they were doing a revolution. They had revolved. The political system established by the Constitution was modeled on the British system and on the colonial assemblies. No, it just straight up wasn't. Like, it absolutely was not. Because they tried a political system based on the colonial assemblies. It was called the
Articles of
Articles of
Confederation,
Confederacy.
which
yeah.
didn't work.
And they were just,
Because-
they looked at it and they're like, oh, this doesn't work. They planned it out on paper, said, this is a bad idea, and then planned out, well, they actually did it. They tried it for like, what was it, like a year?
A year and a half.
Enough time for them to draft a better constitution.
Yes.
Which
Like,
was
again,
not modeled on the British system.
No. Sure, there were some British principles like English common law, but
I mean, they had some ideas. Yeah, the legal system was based on British common
Based on
law.
what?
But then they
Uh,
changed it a lot.
Yes.
And now
and
we
the
have a
fact that, again,
civil law
there
system and not a
wasn't-
common law system.
Certain it was not a settled debate. They spent years writing letters to the public arguing for the Constitution, and there was a fairly sizable counter movement. Everybody forgets about the Anti-Federalists, but I remember it, so nobody else has to, I guess. But like it was
Federalists.
like it was not certain that
Here's
this
the
was going to work.
Here's
like,
a fun fact
um,
about the Anti-Federalists. Because the Federalists had control of the post office, they basically just started obstructing Anti-Federalist mail.
Based.
Based.
Like
I mean,
Patrick-
literal
like,
censorship, but okay.
like Thomas Paine and like Patrick Henry were like
Listen, that's
were
just how,
They can
that's
just
just
deliver
how-
their own letters.
were
That's how
famously, like,
partisanism
publicly
works. You don't let the
against
people
it.
you don't like do the things you don't like, and it's mutually agreed upon that you will fuck each other over, because that's just how
Yeah.
the game goes.
Like the Constitution was like a secret collection of elites locking themselves in a building in Philadelphia and hoping to God something useful came out at the other end. And like Patrick Henry was like, "I smell a rat," and Thomas Paine was writing pamphlets about like, "Oh, they are going to establish monarchy to burn the building down now." Um, Nothing was certain. Like the early republic was on the brink of civil war for like years. Like Shays' rebellion happened like the moment the Constitution was signed. Like most of the world was looking at this and thinking, "Oh, this is going to immediately tear itself apart," like most new countries do when they come out of a revolution.
Yeah, it was kind of
fact that we-
miraculous that it didn't all collapse.
Immediately,
Yeah.
we still ended up having a civil war later.
No, see, it didn't collapse because we founded it all on the British principles, which is why we're like similar to them.
And then, so
We had
the
truly
proof,
got a
In
new
all the ways
society.
we're not.
his proof is so fucking stupid. I had to like just kind of stop reading and like collect myself. The proof is that Britain and all of its colonies that were populated predominantly by people of British descent ended up with systems of representative democracy essentially similar to that of the United States. Gee, Ted, I wonder why that happened. It's almost like, hear me out, after the Americans proved the successfulness of their model,
That-
the
it was
other
really
colonies,
stable.
and more importantly, their ability to leave the British Empire, that the other colonies were eventually like, we're going
Yeah,
to
we
do
can do
that
that.
too, so
Yeah,
that we
we-
can keep our tax money instead of giving it to Britain.
But see, Britain was already moving that way.
No,
by
they
itself.
weren't. They
No, they weren't. They fiercely fought their independence.
his proof that they were moving that way on their own is
Yeah.
that they eventually ended up there anyway. But I would argue, I mean, okay, probably monarchism would have inevitably collapsed in like the 250 years since then, but definitely would have taken a
fought
whole lot longer.
Nailed to
Yeah,
hold on to their
exactly,
empire.
The same thing's happening, so it's not really a
Someone
revolution, is
else
it?
would have done a revolution instead. It would have happened in like, I don't know, Russia. Well, it kind of did happen in Russia.
It
Russia.
happened twice
Oh
in
wait, yeah,
Russia.
Russia literally did their own revolution against the monarchy.
They had multiple revolutions in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Theirs was just
And-
later than like America and France's.
And they successfully had the revolution before India became independent.
And-
I remember some TV historian saying that the last shot of the American Revolution was fired in 1947 in India when India achieved independence and the dissolution of the British Empire happened. Like, none of these things were inevitable. You can only claim that now because you have a hindsight, which is not how causality works.
Like the claim that like it's inevitable, like it just doesn't make any sense to me. That like
Change doesn't matter because it would have happened anyway. Doesn't
Yeah,
yeah,
but
it
why
doesn't
would
make
it?
why
sense.
did it need to happen?
If it would have happened anyway, then whatever change would have happened is the change.
No, here's the thing: if it would have happened anyway, then it's not real change.
But it's still change.
No,
It's
we're
just
just
happening
slow progression,
earlier
right? We just
instead
need-
of
yeah.
later.
So it's not a real change. We need.
But that is real
wouldn't have
change because
happened.
it's still change.
No, we need something that wouldn't
And
have
it's-
happened unless this happened.
But
It's
the-
self-defeating logic. It destroys itself. If you were to put this in a computer, the computer would light itself on fire.
It halts.
any
This
change
halts.
that happens isn't real change because it would have happened anyway. Just means that no change is change, regardless of when it happens.
Yeah, because we haven't done any real change yet.
But that's only because you've said real change. Change that happens doesn't count as real change because it would have happened anyway.
Yeah, that's why we
If
need
I
to do
did-
change that wouldn't have happened anyway.
You need the
What change is
you,
that?
Only things that don't happen count as change. Things that do happen don't count. If it happens, it doesn't count.
If I define the color red to be blue, then nothing is red.
Now, see,
She-
you gotta see where
Hey,
society is
folks.
slowly progressing, and then we gotta like do a complete 180 from that for real change.
But that's still change, and
Yeah, no, it's self-defeating. It's beautiful. And then he continues on with this with industrial technological.
no,
society
hold on, wait. We
cannot
have
be
to read
reformed.
his incredible. Once again, hedges his terrible argument. Still, one has to use common sense in applying the principles. They are expressed in
Does one.
imprecise language that allows latitude for interpretation, and exceptions to them can be found. Exceptions can be found? You failed to give one concrete example.
Also, if
At
they
least
just
he was
have like
forthcoming with all the exceptions.
if they just have wide exceptions, then they're not really principles, are they?
Yeah, because your
Not a
whole
robust theory.
claim is because these principles are absolute, we have no choice but to mail bombs. But then you admit they're not actually absolute. They just usually apply most of
Yeah,
the
I feel
time.
like that's the kind of thing I really want a more concrete understanding of before I start mailing out the bombs.
Yeah,
Which I will
like,
not do because
are
I'm
you
not a
sure?
terrorist. I do not condone the mailing of bombs in Minecraft or otherwise.
Are you sure we shouldn't? I don't know. Try like tweeting, like doing some Tumblr discourse.
He couldn't tweet yet. They didn't have it yet.
Like,
Ted would have been an excellent poster.
Imagine Ted's fucking Substack.
He would have made. He would have been the first. Substack
Brandon's laughing
millionaire.
so loud that his mic didn't pick it up, but I can hear him through the wall. for those not in the know, Substack is literally just Twitter, but you have to pay to see the tweets.
Ew.
and
It's
they
like
get emailed to
it's
you.
a it's like OnlyFans but for discourse. You
Why
pay,
would anyone?
Some people are really addicted to the sound of their own voice.
yeah.
And
That's
they are convinced that other people want to pay to feed their addiction.
it makes sense for like certain
Maybe.
kinds of niche content that would be like essentially
Patreon
it's
for op-ed
yeah
writers.
it's the same sort of like, hey,
The
do you
lowest
like
form of
my
life.
essay about, I don't know, anime titties? Then support me on Patreon. It's that, but for people that write op-eds, because the yeah. Did Ted ever just like try writing an op-ed? Does he
I
know
think
that
this
that's a
is it.
thing people do? Does he know that's an option?
I mean, this was published in the Washington Post, which I guess it means he would put it in the op-ed
Okay, yeah,
section.
technically this was an op-ed, but he mailed 17 bombs first. I'm saying, did you at least try before you started sending bombs? Or do you just go, well, no one would read it anyway?
I
I'm
mean, I'm fully
betting
convinced
the
that
answer
half
is
of his-
no.
because of I think because he viewed all other movements as failures or
Here's the thing. Even if people did read
can't
it,
succeed.
they're not going to care about it.
Yeah. Well, Ted, we did read it,
Write
and
more
we
then.
still don't really care.
like
hate to
'cause he
break it
hates
to you.
leftists, so I'm going to use it as a counterexample. Like our boy Marx and Engels wrote so fucking much to convince people of what they were thinking, like a terrifying amount. Like they possibly like in the joke like Garth Marenghi says that they've written more books than some people have read.
Yeah, like Marx didn't do any violence. Marx didn't mail any bombs.
He
Marx,
did partake in the Paris Commune, but I think that was like not in a combat role.
Yeah, that,
Did he actually?
He was part of the Paris Commune, yeah.
It was a rear echelon in the Paris Commune. I actually don't know what he did, but yes, he did. If nothing
It's-
else, he wrote about how cool it was.
Yeah, so like he was involved in revolutionary activity.
but he was not out there like actually doing the violence.
no, but he wasn't shooting people. He was
Yeah.
administrating because
He
was
just
an
did
economist.
he just did the discourse.
He was a
And
economist.
people
We
still
weren't supposed to
listened.
give them guns.
People took what he had to say seriously. Not everyone agreed, but enough people agreed that it like did some praxis about it.
Yes.
But the
I'm
difference,
curious, actually. Has there been any like imitations of Kaczynski after his
I
manifesto
don't
went out? Like,
really
did anyone,
know.
like admit like
Like
They-
copycats.
yeah, do some copycats
Copycat
of it
bombing?
and like cite like yes, Kaczynski was the reason that they did that.
Some modern Anprim groups take him to heart and just sort of ignore the part where he makes fun of them.
Well, and prim groups just take the first 12 or whatever, however many words it is, of the essay as just a motto.
oh yeah,
And then ignore the
Industrial
rest of the fucking
Revolution and its
essay.
consequences have been a disaster for the human race.
That gets regularly quoted,
Yeah,
mostly as
Funny.
a meme.
yeah, it's literally a copy pasta at this point. I see that shit in VTuber chats. You are watching virtual anime girls over the internet.
Yeah, but they haven't been over. At least they've been under socialized.
Alright, so the answer seems to be no. No one really did a praxis about this.
So clearly, this was a complete failure,
Yeah.
and Ted is just completely wrong.
I like
Well-
the idea
That,
that
like,
mailing 17
this is
bombs
the way
counts as
to do
incrementalism.
That
But yeah, because he didn't do it all at once. He sent them out one after the other.
Yeah, it's incremental.
It's like, you should have gone for the salvo approach. Just-
The
Well, honestly,
only
that
the
probably
only
would've been more
people
effective.
the only movement that really like cared about this was the anarcho-primitivist movement, which Ted himself denounced. And because they're
To be
just
fair,
a
they
bunch
are.
of dumb hippies.
Well, it's because he's not a primitivist.
He's
not. I think. The
I
thing
don't
he
know
said
what
was
he
he's not
is.
against
You would
technology,
think
he's-
he would be an anarcho-primitivist.
he's
But
not against
He's like
technology on
that
principle.
brilliant.
He's against society on principle.
And technology is the tool that society uses.
Yes, technology is merely the tool of society. I guess he views it as morally neutral.
Like
He
he
also-
wouldn't. If
He
he,
also
had
writes against the Anprim premise that primitive society had greater abundance just by virtue of there being less shit to do.
yeah, well he
Like,
doesn't.
he rejects the idea. He rejects the idea that like primitive society was actually had very little work to be done once the meat came in, which is kind of like the central thesis of primitivism. Like, no, actually, it was really hard to be it was really hard to be primitive.
no
actually.
subsistence existence is hard. Yeah, no. Like hiking is a fun hobby. Learning how to identify berries and mushrooms is a fun hobby. Foraging for survival is not fun. Like gardening is fun. Subsistence agriculture is not fun.
a lot easier to make a home garden and maintain it when I know that if things don't go quite well, I can just go to the supermarket.
Okay, so are we at industrial technological society cannot be
Yes.
reformed?
In all caps.
Yes.
And
Is
all
that meant to be a
caps.
header?
Yes.
So he
in
typed
the
this.
printed edition, it's a header.
Yeah, he typed it up on a typewriter.
He just forgot
Which-
to hit the new line character.
Well, he didn't have like bold, italics, or underline. So he just has to use capital letters for that effect.
Props to him for using a mechanical typewriter. He built up impressive finger strength.
The fact that he didn't just write it by hand is really funny to me. Because like
His handwriting was probably if he was
Ted,
if he was living
the
in the woods,
typewriter
probably
is a
didn't have
product of the techno-industrial society. Like the
light.
least you can do,
You claim industrial society and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race, yet you use a typewriter.
the least you can do
Sure.
is fucking write that shit by hand. Come on, it's not that hard. This isn't that long. The foregoing principles help to show how hopelessly difficult it would be to reform the industrial system. Remember, the paragraph immediately before this says these are only general guidelines and not rules. And then he's like, but those general rules, which can never ever be broken and are always correct enough to base my ideology off of, says that we have to just destroy society. There has been a consistent tendency, going back at least to the Industrial Revolution, for technology to strengthen the system at a high cost in individual freedom and local autonomy. Hence, any change designed to protect freedom from technology would be contrary to a fundamental trend in the development of our society. I do not agree with this at all. Like,
What
I
paragraph
see
is that?
no reason
111.
Okay.
I see no reason why you can't keep your own technology. Like, definitely we don't all need to be working 40 hours a week making new gizmos to replace the old gizmo which already works. But, like, you don't need to reject the fucking movable press typewriter or the loom, which were Industrial Revolution things. Like
Like early industrial technology was just hooking up a steam engine to the loom, which we had water-powered looms dating back to antiquity of a sort.
Yeah, like does
Like we didn't have the spinning jenny, but like a loom that was not powered by human labor was conceived of by like the Romans.
water and windmills are ancient.
Like I saw
They
a
had the idea
hilarious
of the
post.
steam engine in the ancient Greece. Like they understood the principles. Their society just didn't really have a whole lot of use for it at the time.
Yeah,
Right.
they really just didn't have the metallurgy skills to actually make one that wouldn't break, that was big enough
Like,
to
one
be useful.
big enough to, one big enough to do things that they would have wanted to do.
They totally made like little teeny goofy ones. So okay, so water mills date back to 200 BC. The oldest evidence of one. It's entirely possible that there were ones before then, just no writing has survived.
because they were made of wood, and wood tends to rot.
And they were written on paper, and paper also tends to rot. So, like... Alright, hold on, hang on. Hold on. There's only one way to get our questions answered.
Wolfram Alpha,
No.
Question?
No. I have questions for Ted,
Quora.
and we're gonna
you can
we're
write
gonna
him a
get them
letter.
answered. All right, Ted.
Are we doing the divination?
We're
already?
we're
not even at the end.
we're doing a séance. Are water mills evil? Yes. Okay. All right. Oh well. Wait. Hold on. Wait. Are you Ted? Wait. How do you spell that? Kaczynski?
And Polax.
Close enough.
Hold
We
on,
gotta make
hold
sure we
on,
got the
hold
right
on,
guy
from
first
Northern
anyway.
Pennsylvania. Let me try this. There's so many Poles up there. Like they're called the Pennsylvania Dutch. It's a misnomer.
Okay,
Not because
alright.
they're
German.
German. It's because
Yeah.
they're Polish.
All right, we got Ted on the line
We
here.
love Kutztown, yeah, we do.
Are windmills evil? Yes. Okay. All right. No mills.
No milling.
Nope, no grinding grain for bread.
How do you feel about the loom? No looms. Okay. Well, at least he's consistent. What about vibrators? C A N N O T space
Not.
S A cannot say.
Ted would rather not talk about vibrators.
All right, fair enough. Sensitive subject. Were the Greeks based? I'm trying to figure out.
I really
No
hope this
N.
goes- Oh.
Oh.
Because they can. I mean, if you take the based, I mean,
Wait, T. He's still going.
Well,
Not
the base by
I
modern
was really
perception.
hoping it was gonna start spelling out based
okay.
No, I just like the idea of that we'll consider the
N?
ancient Greek act of pederasty based or not.
O.
Not known?
Not no. Oh, come on, Ted.
Unknown. He
It
does
is
not know.
unknowable.
All right, interesting. What about the Mesopotamians? Wait. Maybe he's confused about the question. Do you like the Mesopotamians and their pre-industrial Revolutionary Society.
I would keep it to one question at a time. I don't think I would go with double barrel.
No. All right. Well, it's a.
Can you turn the stream delay down so I can actually see the answers in real time instead of waiting to you to excitedly exclaim the answer?
Yeah, why do you have stream delay?
Stream delay is just part of streaming.
Yeah,
It-
but this is like
How-
this is like 10 seconds. This is like actual
Oh.
like you're trying not to get stream sniped delay.
I.
Are you trying not to get stream sniped by the ATF?
He's not
Was it
building
the- was it-
firearms.
Were the
And yep.
ATF in on the manhunt for Kaczynski? Because explosives are part of their
Yes, they were. I don't know how to
I
get to my
don't think podcasting counts as constructing a class 10.
stream set.
thing. It's constructive. It's constructive possession. You have access to a store to buy fertilizer at, and you have the Unabomber's manifesto. Therefore, it's constructive possession.
Oh, I bet it's in my dashboard. Latency mode. Low latency. Alright.
Means we shouldn't come into any problems unless Josh starts streaming Amogus.
I think he does.
How much
But he plays Amogus.
how much bandwidth do you think
Streams
Amogus
HBO
takes?
Max. Too much.
No. Like
It's-
0.
Well, the fact that it exists bothers me. So
what do you have against Amogus?
it's too big. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of these Amoguses.
Oh my god. If
You
I get
smuggle
19
amongst
more
me.
followers on Twitch, I qualify for affiliate.
You have
Oh
followers
shit, I
on
don't
Twitch?
actually follow you yet.
Follow me on Twitch.
There you go.
All donation money will go to stationery to write letters to Ted, in which I tell him how much I hate him.
All donations go to posting bail for whichever one of us gets arrested by the feds first.
Please, Mr. FBI man, I think he's cringe. I don't even like him anymore.
Alright, so back
All
to the
right,
book.
back to the book.
Reforms are too timid to be effective.
So we're on 111?
111.
Yeah.
This is where he really gets into it, and where everything really falls apart. Like swing and a miss on this one. Any change does not. Yeah, we said that. Consequently, such a change either would be a transitory one, soon swamped by the tide of history, or, if large enough to be permanent, would alter the nature of our society. Or the hidden third option that he already said was an option, but he forgot to mention here conveniently. It would happen anyway. It is inevitable. But he doesn't want to bring that up because that completely ruins his entire argument.
Because one could say, well, Ted, wasn't us returning to your ideal society inevitable? Clearly you didn't have to mail those bombs.
Yeah. Consequently, such a change would either be transitory, meaning doesn't last, or too big. But you already said that change can just happen as a result of natural trends in society, which are permanent because they never trend back the other way. Like,
and Natural doing load bearing throughout his thought process.
Load-bearing natural is the best load-bearing word.
so this entire premise is flawed by his own admission because he forgot about what his actual first principle said.
Well, you hire an editor, kids.
Moreover,
Society.
since society would be altered in a way that could not be predicted in advance, there would be great risk. Ted, you mailed 17 bombs. You don't care about risk. Changes large enough to make a lasting difference in favor of freedom would not be initiated because it would be realized that they would gravely disrupt the system. So any attempts at reform would be too timid to be effective. Even if changes large enough to make a lasting difference were initiated, they would be retracted when their disruptive effects became apparent. Source. Dude, trust me. Thus,
I mean, he's not inherently wrong. Like the social progress of the '60s has been the targeted attack of like a 50-year conservative backlash. But like
true,
that's not just
true.
But that doesn't mean reverting back to it is
No.
inevitable.
no. It's exactly. It's not just like, oh yeah, there's backlash, but it doesn't spring out of nowhere. Like people make decisions, which is
Yeah, so that's a good point. I have that in my notes here. Ted seems to like entirely reject like the human element of society,
yes.
and
He's
just
gone.
there is like this shadow monster lurking beneath like in the sewers
The anthropomorphized monster, boogie monster that is society.
called the
is
system.
invented.
It's called it's called the techno-industrial system, and it's like sinister tendrils puppet us through our daily lives and manipulate society.
Except for me.
And no one has any free will or praxis. Not like, which is funny because he even like he's like, yeah, so there's like, I don't know, 500 people whose decisions actually matter. It's like, okay, great. Have you considered writing letters to them?
We're mailing bombs to them.
No, you
In
haven't.
Minecraft.
Satire.
Of course
Remember,
not.
like even his practice was just to random people he found in the phone book who knew what C code was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't go after the big decision makers in society.
He
No.
didn't mail bombs to ExxonMobil. He didn't mail bombs to the president. The only like CEO, like an decision maker, TM, was an airline CEO, which like
He
even
failed.
as
He would
even
take
as
the bus.
CEOs go or lower on the tier.
He would like take a Greyhound over to the like a town, go into their college, just walk into a random student lounge and just leave a box with a bomb in it on the table for someone to pick up.
Yeah, he didn't want to make change. He wanted people to read his book about making change.
Well, he could have at least given it a shot himself.
Much different, like a more palatable tone for the book if he like asked himself as the failed revolutionary, as opposed to saying everyone else is.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
at least
If
make
he
him
was,
a little more
if he was
sympathetic.
like, I have been writing letters and articles for 20 years, and you never listened, and now you'll all pay. That would have at least been like cool.
Interesting.
Narratively satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, I have tried nothing. I'm all out of ideas. Time to mail bombs.
I've tried nothing. I am all out of ideas. Is Pete Kaczynski?
Because that's exactly what he did. He had one idea: mail bombs. It's like
This will
you
never
know what
get
this
a
reminds me of?
prestige TV miniseries where we make him inexplicably hot.
It's like when you play a tabletop, right? And you're like, okay, we should be good role players and try and negotiate our way through this conflict. Oh, would you look at that? It failed. I ready my axe. He's basically done that, except he hasn't even tried. I feel like he actually just really wanted to make and mail bombs. Like this entire like he just genuinely just wanted to bomb people and needed to justify to himself because he's over socialized. He couldn't just admit that mailing bombs fulfills his power process. The rest of us we're living fine. It's only him.
Could have gone just like full egoist with it and just like, okay, yeah, sure, you are based. But no. Instead,
I
he's trying to
love-
hedge it with this.
A full egoism is fun. It's a funny meme. I'll give it that much. That would have
Yeah.
been again would have been more entertaining.
Would have been interesting. But no.
He should have. You know what he should have done? He should have done like a BTK, and instead of publishing a manifesto, he should have just written terrible poetry and made the media print that instead. Because that's funny. Disclaimer. I do not support BTK or his actions. He is a convicted serial killer, currently serving...
Is he
Wait,
dead?
I think he might actually be
He
dead.
might
Hold
have
on.
died in prison. He-
Does dying in prison get you out of a life sentence? Or if you
He's-
somehow come back, do you still?
Well,
get a life
you usually get multiple life sentences.
sentence? That is true.
Currently serving 10 consecutive life sentences at El Dorado Correctional Facility.
So he has to die 9 more times.
Exactly. We do not endorse his actions, but
No,
you know
it
what?
turns out strangling prostitutes and like cutting open women is bad, actually.
Turns
He
out.
was fucked up. Like, the shit he did was worse than, like, even by serial killer standards. The degree of, like, sadism and torture.
Okay, so he's on like the John Wayne Gacy side as opposed to like the Zodiac killer side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Zodiac Killer just kind of, like, walked by parked cars and, like, shot people through the window. Which at least is, like, a quick way to go. Disclaimer, we do not endorse the Zodiac Killer either. Although he got away, so...
Yeah, because he wrote cryptic letters that are possibly uncrackable.
So-
he might
So
he did
they...
a little trolling.
the funniest thing... So they actually did crack his letters. Most of them. The problem is...
Another tangent here.
He was really bad at using his own cipher. So, like, automated methods to try and crack it failed because he fucked
he just
up.
Encrypted it wrong.
He did it wrong.
Wow.
So, in order to decrypt it, you have to make the same mistakes that he did.
That's
Which
a
is why it
huge
was eventually
infosec.
cracked by, like, some elderly couple who, like, used to be, like, teachers and got bored doing crosswords. They were the ones
Right,
to
so
crack it.
and made the same mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. How lucky.
Alright, back to our original topic at hand here.
Yes.
People anxious to rescue freedom without sacrificing the supposed benefits of technology will suggest naive schemes for some form of society that would reconcile freedom with technology. Apart from the fact that people who make such suggestions seldom propose any practical means by which the new form of society could be set up in the first place, it follows from the fourth principle that even if the new form of society could be once established, it would either collapse or would give results very different from those expected. This is so stupid to me because he's like, if we make a new society, it might not work out the way we planned. Therefore, we shouldn't even bother trying.
Like, what is he actually suggesting instead? Like, because presumably he wants to, if not, even if, like, you don't call it an actual society, he wants to change society fundamentally. What's stopping it from the people who like the previous society just going, actually, let's bring back all the stuff Ted got rid of?
Good
And that's where
question.
the violence comes
I
in.
hope
You
he
have to
gets
kill
into that
everyone.
later on, but basically, he does not want... he is anti-society. He just...
And also technology to an extent. He wants us to all like live as mole people, scraping dirt to get by, so that we don't accidentally come up with a society or a technology. But he also says that's also impossible to do if you try to reconcile these. I get lost in the sauce very easily, because people are naturally going to develop technology, like.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't
Yeah,
really
so
he has yet to define what technology is. So if it's like sick tools, well then like we're absolutely fucked because birds and monkeys and otters have developed tool use.
Yeah, hang on, where is it that he talks about that?
And if it's like advanced technology, well, like, okay, the building blocks of technology needed to create a civilization, plows and like water wheels and like even stuff where it's like animal powered. Well, that's 10,000-year-old stuff.
And any society that develops technology is going to
Become complex
and beat out any society that just doesn't. So, like, how are you going to manage to keep technology from just happening again?
Right. Like I think there are still a very few number of hunter-gatherer societies that are still existent in the world today. And the only reason they haven't been wiped out off the map is like they've been like legally protected. Like
It's just like, do not, just don't, stay away, leave them alone.
Yeah. And even then, it's like they still have like bows and arrows and spears and slings, and like a functioning society that is more than because he didn't define what a small group was at the beginning. Does a tribal level count as a small group? Is it just like your immediate friend group? Is it like 50 people? And
We may never know.
never know.
So
You can
he'll.
make it up.
I
great.
have that in my notes. I'll skip ahead a little bit here. 115. He says among primitive peoples, the things that children are trained. Wait. Hold on. Am I in the wrong paragraph? Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
The system has to force people to behave in ways that are increasingly remote from the natural pattern of human behavior. For example, the system needs scientists, mathematicians, and engineers. Pretty much every society ever has had smart people who did thinking things. Like, even, like, first of all, the fucking pioneers still had engineers. Someone had to design the wagons, right?
Someone had to build the house on the homestead.
Like ancient prehistoric civilizations still had like mathematicians who would figure out like how many days of rations, like how much meat do you need to pack in order to sail to that island before you run out of food. They still had people who were like, hey, I did an experiment, here's the right time to plant your crops.
Yeah,
The first writing was used to record like trade deals and taxes.
Yeah. So
It was just like, okay, I am depositing this many cows with this person in exchange for this. Here's the record of the deal. Here's the contract. First writing that we have.
yeah, like what is the difference between like a medicine man or whatever and a modern day scientist? I mean, the application
like
of the
lab
modern
coats.
scientific theory, but like the role in society was the same. They still just tried to figure things out.
Yeah, it's great.
So-
I love an ideology that denies basic human nature, and like castigates it.
Whilst appealing to basic human nature.
Yes.
Ted, do you think they built the fucking pyramids without engineers? Do you think they just kind of winged it as part of fulfilling their power process? Or do the ancient Egyptians not count because because he always comes back to like Industrial Revolution, right?
Or even before that, right? With like Paleolithic, like megalithic structures. Like it took effort to get those rocks to where Stonehenge is.
Yeah.
Those were mined in Wales, which is a long way away from where Stonehenge is today.
They had a guy who knew what rocks to mine, and they had a guy to figure out how to get him over there. Is that not
By a lot
science
of
and
people.
engineering?
Like there are like
It's also not
Paleolithic.
fundamentally necessary for basic survival. So it would probably qualify as what Ted describes as a
A
what's it
surrogate
called?
activity?
A surrogate activity.
Yeah, that's
Building
true.
Stonehenge is a surrogate activity. They didn't need to do it. They chose to for some other reason.
How
Yeah, there
how
are
old
lots
is
of, like,
Stonehenge?
Ancient.
Extremely ancient.
Like there are like lots of those are very, like Neolithic and Paleolithic structures that are like lined up with like the summer and winter solstices. It's like, oh yeah, these are for cultural events, or they're like calendars.
So okay, so
Which is a
being
science
being
and a
able to
math.
tell when the solstices is useful for tracking when to plant and harvest your crops, but you did not need to make a giant ass stone thing. 2 sticks will work just fine. Archaeologists believe Stonehenge was constructed between 3000 to 2000 BC. So I guess even then, too
I
new.
was muted.
We got to go back to the pioneers.
Which was an entirely constructed class, like deliberately molded by government and like cultural ideas.
Top of our existing peoples in the land.
Yes.
And you better believe they had a whole lot of engineers, scientists, and mathematicians because
Like, civil
they
engineering
planned out
as a
their
discipline.
society on paper, literally,
Yeah.
and then went over there to implement it.
Yeah, railroad allotments and all that. Like civil engineering was invented in the 1800s because it was the first engineering that wasn't for military purposes.
Yeah, that stuff's not natural at all.
And neither is like cave paintings or Stonehenge
No,
or
cave painting is natural.
or-
Stonehenge isn't.
or like
So are you
Nazca
telling me that
lines.
Stonehenge was a result of over socialization?
Yeah, they had to get a bunch of people together. They had to learn all that stuff. That's just not. That wasn't natural to them to stack the rocks up.
So we need to go even more primitive than
Yeah.
the
Like
Stonehengers.
Tower of Babel
Go-
level?
No, you've got to go pre-planting and gardening.
I think, yeah, we need to go pre-agricultural. We need to go pre-verbal language, because
go
you
back to the hunting.
if you can't socialize, you cannot over-socialize.
So literally, return to monkey. We have to simply like we're
Or the
taking
pioneers,
degrowth.
because remember, Ted has already signed off on the pioneers as Kool-Aid based.
You see, we
Yeah.
should be part. He wants us to be hunters and gatherers. Nothing more than that.
But he
I like
doesn't
the
even
idea.
say that.
He never actually establishes a hard line on what technology is okay and what isn't.
If you had to learn, that's not good technology.
And I feel like the bottom line is, he's wrong. So it's impossible for him to actually make a good argument, because his conclusion is incorrect and there's no way to reach it. So his arguments are just bad. Doesn't help that he's, bad at formulating and writing his arguments.
Do we want to jump back up to the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah, back up to
12 and 13?
112, because this is actually important. So 13 here. Even on the very general grounds, it seems highly improbable that any way of changing society could be found that would reconcile freedom with modern technology. So maybe modern technology is bad, but ancient technology is cool and based? Like, bow and arrows are cool.
But we don't
So-
know the dividing line. Maybe
so-
he'll say it at one point, but
Like, am I allowed to hook up my mule to 2 pieces of stone to grind corn?
Are wheels okay?
Very important.
Is metalworking okay?
can
See,
I
all that stuff
divide my
leads back
field?
to modern technology?
But
Or can
like
we do
the
s- can we-
pioneers?
Like, the Babylonians did a bunch of math to figure out the calendar. Is that math cringe, or is that based?
Is the knowledge needed to construct a ziggurat okay?
Ziggurats are weird. I'm not a fan
You
of
don't need a
ziggurats,
ziggurat.
man. Those things creep me out. I hope I don't get canceled
I
for...
find that so funny.
Please don't cancel me.
I
You're
like the
just
idea
being
of there.
disturbed by ziggurats.
Oh, I like the idea of like you're gonna get canceled by like the 3 guys who like practice Babylonian religion. Like the not even like neo pagans. We have to need to go deeper. We're gonna get canceled by the Zoroastrians.
No, please. Spare me. Alright. On to some more dumb bullshit.
Ah, shit, sorry.
As explained in paragraphs 65 through 67 and 70 through 73, modern man is strapped down by a network of rules and regulations, and his fate depends on the actions of persons remote from him whose decisions he, he cannot influence. This is not accidental, or a result of the arbitrariness of arrogant bureaucrats. It is necessary and inevitable in any technologically advanced society. The system has to regulate human behavior closely in order to function. Remember, the system refers to a shadowy tentacle monster that lives in the sewers. Picture
I
that.
like the idea of like, he's writing this like as if he's like uncovered a great truth, and like that is the basic idea of like Jean Locke's like social contract theory, where like in exchange for some personal liberty, state has a guy who keeps me from getting murdered while I sleep.
Yeah.
This isn't a new idea. He isn't boldly shattering truths here with this, which is an interesting why he's writing it this way. Is that these are new ideas that no one's ever had before.
I want to imagine like the society monster engaged in like an epic kaiju fight against the utilitarian monster.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun movie.
And then, like, at the end, the frightful hobgoblin that's stalking Europe comes in with a steel chair. That's good.
Or the
Shout out to
specter of communism.
Yes, shout out to the guy who thought that the specter of communism was a real ghost.
Wait, it's not? I thought that was Marx. I thought it was the spirit of Marx.
Ontology is when you're personally haunted by Marx's actual literal ghost.
So yeah, basically what he's saying is that as long as there is society, our freedoms will be restricted. It is impossible to have a society that does not restrict our freedoms. His proof is that he looked around and said, yeah, I don't think it could happen. Therefore, it's impossible. It is true that some restrictions on our freedom could be eliminated, but generally speaking, the regulation of our lives by large organizations is necessary for the functioning of industrial technological society. The result is a sense of powerlessness on the part of the average person.
Yes, our modern bureaucracies, because I have to stand in line at the DMV, I am debased as a human being and brought lower than low, as opposed to, say, living
This is
out in the
true, but it's
woods.
because of a lack of technology at
Yeah,
the DMV.
honestly, I would argue that technology has done more for individual freedoms than, like, anything else. Because, for example, right? Like, okay, sure. So, the Native Americans had more freedom to, like, not
Themselves.
go to a job and just write all day. But at the end of the day, they couldn't really. Well, actually, I guess a lot of them didn't really have a written language. They just. But anyway, like, okay, sure. I like. If I say I wanted to be an author, right? Like that was my dream. I want to write books, but I can't on account of I have to go to my job. But like, compare me to the medieval peasant, right? They literally
Twice the
could
work,
not.
sun up to sundown.
They could not. First of all, they had to work more, despite not being industrialized. They had to work more hours in worse conditions. And they physically could not write and publish a
against-
book if they
And it was
wanted
against
to.
the law for them to try to do anything else.
Or leave. They could not leave.
I can
serf
sit.
was
I can
bound to
sit
the
at my
land.
desk for my like 5 hours of free time a day, write a manuscript, and then email it to a bunch of publishers. And if none of them want it, then I can just put it up on the internet and people can read it. Right? Like, I can do that. But Ted would be like, well, that's not what I mean by freedom, because you're not actually going through your power process. Being an author is a surrogate activity that you don't actually want to do. The only things you want to do are eat, sleep, and fuck. And everything else you just invented to give you things to do.
Yeah.
That's his claim.
It's such a narrow view of human existence. Like, it bears repeating that this is so reductive of what humans actually materially did in history. Like, we were telling stories and doing non-survival things even when we were subsistence hunters and gatherers. Like, the oral tradition was alive and well in those times. Like, we just don't know about it because it's been lost to history. The idea,
Again,
that,
Ted just
that early
doesn't.
life was,
Ted is
simple.
not a historian.
It's-
He's not a sociologist.
know.
He's not an anthropologist. He doesn't actually know shit about what he's saying. He just thinks
Obviously
it's
didn't even
correct.
look at the Wikipedia page for any of them.
Yeah.
That would have been hard to do in in the 80s, but
Well,
Ted,
you
good
could have
point.
gone to the fucking. He went to the library. He read all the time. He just, I guess,
thought it was all lies.
read the
Liberal
wrong books.
media hoax.
Well, remember what he said about anthropologists.
I like the idea that in his mind, a complex inner life is a liberal hoax made up by the media and industrial society. And that
Correct.
we're all just smooth bowling balls inside our heads that only want to do power process, and that's it. We're just robots. Cool.
Back here to 115, which has multiple stupid takes in it, mind you. Among the American Indians, for example, boys were trained in active outdoor pursuits, just the sort of things that boys like. But in our society,
Boys will be boys.
children are pushed into studying technical subjects, which most do grudgingly. Man, there's nothing that a young boy likes more than planting and harvesting maize. I'm just really passionate about gourds.
You're only saying that because you've been conditioned by society.
That's true.
Yeah, he is correct that like modern, especially Western style schooling is like an industrial creation.
Yeah.
Both in like the philosophical concept.
I
of, like,
will
the educated
concede that
populace
if
is
you
good
give
and
a
that it prepares you for factory life.
If you
You're
give a
really like,
4-year-old
for
a
society.
shovel and you just let them out into the backyard, they will have a fucking blast digging holes. So maybe that just is a fundamental part of human nature. And only by so over-socializing us into not ruining the lawn have they restricted our power process.
The idea that
Honestly,
like
though,
Native American
ruin the
children were
lawn.
trained to like know how to do the outdoorsmanship stuff. It's like, yeah, well, first of all, they had to not die, and two, there was no alternative. It was play outside, go out and touch grass, or do nothing.
Also,
Because
like,
there was
so he's like, yes. Every Native American boy was just a huge fan of farming and hunting. They were just so content to do that all day. How do you know, Ted? Have you talked to any of them? Were you there? Like, definitely you could find some Native Americans who were like, man, this sucks. I don't want to do this shit.
this idea of whether or not to retain traditional Native practices or to modernize is a topic of contentious debate within the community, and Ted has simply wandered in and simply declared it solved because he feels like it.
But in our society, children are pushed into studying technical subjects, which most do grudgingly.
Yeah, school
Also,
sucks, but
Blamed without any evidence.
yeah, sure, like going to school is terrible and can be a dehumanizing experience.
Alright, I'm actually okay with Ted not doing a lot of research on this one, because I don't want him going up to children and being like, are you having fun in school? And then they
Fair
just
point.
cry and run away. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the picture of this guy. Look at that fucking mug.
Like, yeah, sure, school can be a dehumanizing experience. I cite John Waters' seminal work, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. But it doesn't have to be this way. Like, if you do any sort of alternative pedagogy, sorry for the academic lingo,
I always forget
children
that
have a better time in
pedagogy is
school.
not, like, the same thing as pederasty.
No, it is
And
not. It's
in
like-
my mind, those are the same word.
No, it's shit like the Montessori schools where like you just let kids like play all day as a form of learning, or like there's another specifically left wing form of pedagogy where like you it's more like electrical based, and you like engage the child directly instead of just assigning homework and telling them to just do it or else, where like you do like an active two-way process similar to like graduate studies, but you start that at like the elementary school level. Yeah, just because our current form of schooling is terrible doesn't mean we have to throw the concept of schooling away. But that runs entirely to antithesis to Ted's idea that any sort of reform will fail or was going to happen anyway, so it doesn't count.
Also,
Which is-
this doesn't...
It just goes in a circle and just destroys itself, which is infuriating to read and to talk about.
He's also missing the fact that not every industrial society has universal education. Like, there are
He had
societies...
to fight for it.
There are societies where the kids don't go to school. They just wake up and then go to the factory. Those were industrial societies.
Ah, the Victorian era.
Yeah,
What a great age Victoriana was.
exactly.
Children don't belong at Pride.
Like,
they belong at a
imagine
factory
imagine
getting
this,
their
right?
Arms ripped off.
Among the Victorian British, boys were trained in chimney sweeping and coal mining. Just the sort of things that boys like.
Or if they were rich, like sitting on a chair and like stuffing a cravat in their neck.
Chimney sweeping and coal mining, that's all part of industrial society.
Yeah, but What's the difference between chimney sweeping and planting corn? Like
Planting corn, you're interacting with the outside.
Chi-
With the natural world.
chimneys are kind of outside
Corn's
ish.
not natural.
Okay,
That's
maybe.
also true.
Well, yeah, corn is absolutely not natural. Like we've been fiddling with like stuff corn to make it corn for like since we figured out, hey, if we plant maize in a field, it works better than if we're just picking at it. So like which he relies on natural a lot. So like the naturalist fallacy is all throughout this work.
It
Uh,
the naturalist fallacy makes up this thing's veins.
Yes, and also, which is that's level 1. If you go to the advanced level, the world hasn't been hasn't been natural like ever since the moment we descended from the trees, we started shaping our environment to suit our needs.
Yeah, I would argue like anything after like the invention of agriculture itself was
Possibly
not
even earlier.
natural. Even
Probably earlier, but that would be like a hard line where it's just like, okay, we're no longer natural.
yeah. Also,
Because, like
I don't.
It's
because-
no longer up for debate.
The whole
because Homo
natural
sapiens, like,
versus
drove-
unnatural is already bullshit anyway.
right, because like early Homo sapiens drove most of the megafauna to extinction.
Based.
Like
They had it
like
coming.
those giants,
It had
like
done.
those
Fuck
giant
mammoths.
sloths and mammoths.
And dinosaurs.
Dodos.
If they
It's
didn't want
not
to be
megafauna.
extincted, they shouldn't have been so easy to hunt.
They should. Hang on. I want to look up some pictures of like prehistoric
Megafauna?
megafauna. Giant sloth.
Yeah, like that's why. I'll just do this as a tangent while he's looking this up.
Oh my
Avocados
god, this looks so fucking
Evolved.
stupid.
evolved to be eaten by giant sloths, which is why they are the state of the art. Because the sloth was the only thing that was big enough that could eat them, dissolve the flesh, and poop out the seed. The only reason avocado trees didn't go extinct is that we started harvesting them because we thought that they tasted neat.
They do taste kind of neat.
It tastes good in guac.
and like, which shows that like, okay, so what would the natural thing been to not kill off the sloth? Okay, would the natural thing been to, if we killed off the sloth, do we let the avocado tree also go down?
Avocados are just a product of our over socialization.
Well, modern ones, yeah, due to breeding, that we've made them like bigger and fleshier and tastier. So just it quickly devolves into like a no true Scotsman situation where you just keep moving, and then you never actually get anything done.
I feel
It's
like
great.
that's why Ted never actually says what is cool and good, because any example
And
that
you
he
have
could
to defend it.
any example he could come up with, you could be like, that's not natural, because they invented stone tools.
Thing is, like, imagine if, say, Ted dropped the natural fallacy just out of it. Just, like, didn't use natural, instead early on just defined, like, this is the point in technology that I'm saying before it was good and after it got bad. Like, if he had done that, we could at least have a firm point of discussion to say, okay, before then he's saying it's good, and is it actually good, is it not? That would be something to discuss, but
Yeah, you could
Instead-
interrogate his assumptions.
we could interrogate his assumptions. Instead, we have nothing to go on for whether or not something is natural enough for Ted.
Yeah. We just have to guess. There we go.
Has anyone actually written to him about that, asking that specific question?
Probably.
What does he consider natural enough?
Maybe that's in some of the other letters,
Yeah, I
Maybe the
gotta
printed
read his
version?
other writings.
but
There we go.
want
Giant
to.
sloth.
The giant sloth on your head.
there we go. We found the cute animal mascot to make
Oh
more little
wait,
plushies
hold on,
out
hold
of.
on, hold 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 on.
We can do merchandise. You know what I see? You know what I see him? I see merchandise.
Well, I stole that picture off of BBC.com. So
Yeah, well, okay, but like the idea of a large sloth is not copyrighted by the British Broadcasting Corporation.
no, they do. They patented large sloths.
Well, we'll just put anime eyes on it, and then it's different.
what,
That's legally
what,
distinct.
what is the modern Brit if not a giant sloth?
You've destroyed Anglos. We'll never recover from this.
I'm sorry, please don't cancel me.
I'll apologize to the British. You know what
You're
they
right.
That hurts.
I rescind my request for forgiveness. Do not forgive me. Your your hate fuels me. All right, hold on. I'm gonna figure out how to add a prop to VTube Studio so that I can put this on my head.
Right. Well, you do that.
Yeah, cover for me, buddy.
Okay, so
Tag
we go on to
in.
116. One of these problems, because we are all forced to do things we don't want to do, people naturally start breaking down. And so this creates people who cannot or will not adjust to society's requirements, which includes
Having a
beautiful-
breakdown.
welfare leeches, youth gang members, anti-government rebels, radical environmentalists.
This is so
dr-
fucking funny to me because, like,
dropouts, and
Ted-
resistors of various kinds.
aren't you an anti-government rebel?
You mail bombs. I think
It's
that
like how he equates like the idea of the welfare queen, which is a very neutral and term to just casually drop in, and not loaded in any way. Youth gangs, Scientology, and college dropouts. Dropping out of school, and the conception of the welfare queen, and also a fucking, I don't know, Synanon or whatever. Those are wildly different things that you need to put a little more effort if you need to claim they're all from the same root phenomenon.
Ted putting effort into his arguments.
You need to tell me a little more information if you're gonna claim that like kids who drop out of school and people who and fucking Jonestown came from the same root cause.
I see no difference between these things.
Things are the same actually. Ted, I need you to find the difference between these two pictures. They're the same. And also just resistors of various kinds, which is like, okay, well that runs the gamut between like mild
You.
social, like that includes you, that includes that includes you, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Stalin.
his inclusion of that almost makes me wonder if like this was actually intended to be a bit more neutral.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
There we go.
And just
My little buddy.
I haven't
Beautiful.
brought this up, but I'm fairly certain like this is like a subtweet of a very specific type of person or group of people that like doesn't exist anymore. Like maybe he was whinging about leftists and leftist revolutionaries because he was like mad at the Weather Underground because they also mailed bombs to people and were more effective at it.
He's just jealous.
I buy it.
And so, and therefore, and then he continues on his idea that like technologically advanced societies.
Alex, are you just leaving the other sloth up there?
It requires us to,
Giant
like,
sloths
give up
are
our
social
changes.
animals.
Ah, okay.
It would be rude to separate them.
And you cannot. This is another bold claim that a technological society simply cannot be broken down into small autonomous communities because production depends on the cooperation of people and machines. He isn't really. He says technologically advanced and technological society and within the same point, which I'm like, okay. Is there a difference here?
This
because
is
like
kind of
autonomous
true.
communities, but also autonomous communities have worked together in a modern technological sense. Because that's what else could you describe the kibbutz system as a bunch of autonomous communities working together to grow onions in the desert?
I mean, I definitely think our current level of technology requires society to societize.
Like
Yeah.
you
But
can coordinate
We can.
and be
You
autonomous.
don't have to
like, especially
reject
now.
all technology.
You can sit in the cool economic planning chair and simply calculate the value.
Like, I do think
Uh.
industrial society, has a big problem with like wasting resources by just making new thing. Well, this is really capitalism's fault. Like, the need to sell new product requires creating, manufacturing, and distributing new product, even though old product, worked just as well. And the whole planned obsolescence thing. And we totally could be doing it better and then not need to waste all of our time making new phones when all you really need is a new battery for your old phone.
He kind of did bring that up with like how like the media and advertising like creates needs. But that's again, that's not like an earth-shattering concept. That's like all the people who invented modern advertising were like, this is what we want to do. Like they just said it, but like they said it 120 years ago. So like everyone's kind of forgotten about it, and we have to keep relearning this, I guess.
If he was just saying we are doing too much technology, I would be like, you know what, Ted, you're right. We should do less technology and only do important technology. But instead, he's
Please
like, we
define
should
your
just
terms.
not do anything. We shouldn't like nothing but farm turnips. That's it.
So,
I
how
like
far did
the
you
idea
actually
that like
get before Alex got his sloth situation sorted?
You're in like the middle of 117, right?
yeah, middle of 117, moving swiftly onwards. Which when he says that like if the decision affects 1 million people, then those 1 million people only have 1 millionth of an input. Which I'm like, okay, well this could simply be solved by having a way for those people to influence the guy at the top. This is he's rejecting represent any sort of representative or democratic thing. Which yeah,
You know,
okay,
if you think about it, like if you actually do the math, right? A 1 millionth share in a decision that affects 1 million people is one person's worth of power, which is just as much power as having sole decision making over a decision that
Yourself.
affects only yourself. Like, if you want to pull the math argument here, right?
one power unit per man.
Because that decision is 1 million times more decision-y. You ever think about that, Ted?
Evidently not.
Nope, of course not.
And we could again, there are ways of having feedback and control within a system. If we're gonna again keep doing math here, one of the things I study is systems theory for airplanes. One of the problems is there's inadequate feedback in the system. It all goes to shit. In that case, you just simply put the feedback in so that the pilot knows when pitch control is simply not happening. And this principle, maybe, perhaps, could apply to society, where we have people who are affected by decisions also get to influence the decision makers.
There is no conceivable way to remedy this in a technologically advanced society. The system tries to solve this problem by using propaganda to make people want it really bugs me how he, like, sometimes he uses quotes and sometimes he uses caps. Want the decisions that have been made for them. So, even if this solution were completely successful in making people feel better, it would be demeaning. Okay,
Yes,
so just because
when-
a decision was made that benefits you, and you are convinced that the decision as it benefits you does actually benefit you, it doesn't count because it is demeaning.
It also is not
Because
true.
Ted feels bad.
It also is not true. Like, yeah, because whenever Congress does a thing, the whole media lines up to say this is a good thing, and then we all agree with it.
This is
This is
true.
what happens.
No one has ever disagreed with Congress.
Like even in autocratic systems, like even in North Korea, I'm fairly certain someone in there at some time has thought maybe this is not a good idea, but they don't say anything because they like continuing to breathe. And
He also goes against the point I was going to bring up when I got to this when I was reading it, of like local
Okay.
autonomy. Well, basically, like my position is like, yeah, sure, not having enough sway over things that affect you is a problem, but like where democracy cannot solve that anymore by just giving more people a vote because they already have a vote. Like, the other thing is just limiting the scope, ergo local autonomy. But he's like, no,
Yeah.
this is not acceptable.
That was what I was thinking too. I'm like, okay, well, then what if you just, instead of having a decision that affects 1 million people, you just have 1,000 decisions that affect 1,000 people? No, doesn't work. Not possible. on account. Okay, so I do actually sort of agree with 118 here, that local autonomy, because like
I agree with 117 and 118.
the world is
Cool.
global, that it
Think
is
it through.
very difficult to do local autonomy. Because
Sure,
like
but not everything has to be big scale. You can have things at different scales.
yeah, that's true. Also, like by the nature of local decisions affect me because they are where I am. Like for example, right? A decision to build a road only affects me if it's a
If you're
road
near that road.
near me. You know? So like, yeah, those are the decisions that actually affect me the most. You know, things like I'd say like national border policy, right? They've got significant impact on like the nation as a whole, but not to me because well, I'm not at the border. You know? So like I kind of agree with what he's saying that it's impossible to truly achieve local autonomy. But you
But there are
absolutely
degrees.
can make like the local impactful decisions be done on a local level. And in fact, for the most part, at least in the US, they already are. Like the federal government is not the ones deciding like how to do our buses and where to do the roads, right? That's like the city or the county or the state.
Bye.
Yeah, and
We're pretty close to being done if you can stay like 2 more minutes. Oh, he's
I
gone.
cannot.
Nope.
And
F.
again, because this idea is not inherently unique to TED or that groundbreaking. This is I'm not that familiar with it, so asterisk on all of this. This is similar to the idea of like social ecology and the ideas of like libertarian municipalism or who's the guy? Bakunin, that's the guy. And the ideas that he came up with around the same time as Ted's working up with his ideas, but like, whereas Ted was like an unhinged man living in the woods, trying to kill people, Bakunin wore like pullover sweaters and like had a. So
No, see,
possible
this
to
is
have-
won't kill people.
because it's possible to have ideas, and these ideas without like going unhinged with it. It's this absolutism that's confusing. It's like everything is actually impossible except for exactly what I say, how I say it, which is just
Except that he doesn't say it.
that he doesn't say, which means he's always right because he actually hasn't done anything.
You guys are just too
Beautiful.
far conditioned by society to understand it.
Obviously.
That's true.
I'm glad we have Paul, who is completely unsocialized, to be
You
our
gotta
oracle.
unsocialize yourself to understand this stuff truly.
Oh man, these sure are a lot of words here.
You would think that like being in lockdown would make us more receptive, but I'm not sure if that's true.
119 and 120. I'm not gonna actually read these whole
Thick.
things because this is he
Thick.
says so many words to say so little. This is just
He repeats himself a lot.
yeah. This is basically society bad, system evil, humans serve the system, and not the other way around. Which really just adds nothing to his argument because he's already said it so many times. Autonomy is impossible within the system.
The system only helps us when it helps and reinforce the system.
And remember, the system is a spooky tentacle monster.
He imagines it as such. Any attempts to do so is a joke. You can't have autonomy in the workplace. You can't have autonomy in government. You can't have autonomy under capitalism. You can't do it under socialism.
Everything he says in 120 is exactly right.
Tremendous.
Again,
One-
he also
120
confuses
is-
socialism with state socialism, which is just a different debate we can yell about at another time.
120 is, I mean, it's not even that controversial of an idea. He's really just saying that in a large business, the autonomy of an employee is limited, which
No, autonomy is non-existent in this business.
Yeah,
No matter
that's
what size employee or owner.
Yeah, that's the point.
in a large business it's
This isn't,
limited
like,
because
groundbreaking.
you have to work towards a common goal for the business. In small businesses, well, they don't actually really defend this one. Their autonomy is limited in that they can only do things that won't cause their business to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, sure. You know what,
Society
Ted?
can only do things that won't cause the tribe to die out.
Like,
Yeah.
you're right, but that doesn't that doesn't mean anything. That it's sure. I will concede this one point. A small business owner has limited autonomy because he is restricted by the fact that he must fit into the economic system and conform to its requirements.
Yeah, small business, they can't just do what they want as their business. They, gotta
They
do something
can't
that
fulfill
society
their
wants them to
power
do.
goal or their power process, but trust me, some of those guys run those businesses terribly. And yes, they inevitably go out of
Yeah, and then-
business
yeah,
because
that's
they're
because of
doing it wrong.
society. No, it's because of society they go out of business.
Like the idea.
Yeah,
No one
it's
is
definitely not
there
because
is-
they only stock goods that no one wants at prices no one's willing to pay.
See, that's because of society.
I like this because it absolves Ted of his like personal responsibility for mailing bombs to people.
I don't think Ted wanted to mail the bombs. I think he just had to, though.
I definitely think that he didn't need to. Although
he
I
thought
will
he had
say
to.
that
I don't think he wanted to.
he
but
also
had to.
definitely could have killed a lot more people. Like, he could have mailed many more bombs, and he could have put them in places with much higher likelihood of casualties, right?
See,
But
he didn't
So
want to
can
mail the bombs,
you
but
in
he had to.
Minecraft.
If he didn't mail the bombs, no one would read this. And no one would care about it.
You'd
If I
be
did read it.
surprised, Paul, how many obscure ideologies in manifestos get read, even like outside of a niche academic context. There are so many weird cranks online who have like obscure emojis that are like, "Oh yeah, I subscribe to this ideology made by one guy in the 1700s."
Yeah, but you need everyone to subscribe to it.
the idea, it's so baffling to me, the idea of just picking a guy and be like, "Yup, that's it. That's my ideology."
What's that meme? Like 16-year-old logs online, and decides today they will become political. But here's the thing: like, if everyone thought like Ted, I'm not sure how anything could function.
Everyone thought like Ted we would have bombs everywhere.
We'd just be somehow angrier and more paranoid and more miserable than we are now.
Each person would mail 17 different bombs to another person.
Yeah, I guess. That seems like rough. Like,
We
if you
still
believe
don't
this,
know,
I
like,
really
what
wonder
he's-
how you get up in the morning.
We still don't know what exactly he's after.
Just the vague tentacle monster of society must be destroyed.
It must
But
be
in a way that-
defeated.
But in a way that actually works. But that's unless
He wants
you
us
do
to be
it.
free.
But in a way that is hard to do because true reforms and revolutions are actually nearly impossible, except for this one. But maybe it won't be because these are just guidelines, and also it's so poorly thought out that I'm not sure where the premises stop and the conclusions begin. It's all
I'm
just
not
sort of, like,
sure
It just loops
if
back
they
into itself like in a labyrinthian madness.
do.
It's
All right. Well, that concludes
baffling.
the important discourse for tonight's book club.
All right, are we gonna? Or do you want to call it now, or do you want to feed it into the AI?
I haven't had a chance to find a better system for that. I was working on other stuff, which
You weren't here last week. Basically, Alex explained that he doesn't want to just do it haphazardly.
I'm afraid that it will become too powerful.
Now, actually produce something dangerously coherent.
Yeah, it was already like almost more coherent than Ted. I was gonna work on that this weekend, but instead I attempted to make 3D Kazinki-chan.
Oh God.
It worked. It worked
Oh, God.
really well. I made her in Koikatsu. And I had heard that you can export Koikatsu models to Miku Miku Dance, and you can export Miku Miku Dance models to VTube software. So I was like, what if? Well,
I can't wait for the Kazinki-chan dance video.
oh god. Okay, I have to do this now so that I could do the Fortnite default dance. It turns out
VTube
that
vocode the manifesto, slap it over a Nightcore beat, and just go to town.
Nightcore type beat. So the process goes something like this: make the model in Koikatsu, and then export it, and then import it into Blender, and then fix it because it will be completely fucked, and then import it into Miku Miku Dance, or export it as the format for Miku Miku Dance. You never actually have to put it into Miku Miku Dance unless you want to do Fortnite dances. And
Would you
then
want to?
export it like again into VTube software after you redo all of the rigging by hand and fix the face tracking and the meshes and the bones and the texture mapping. And like, so the plugin, like the or mod or whatever for Koikatsu that adds an export button, if you go into like the comments on the page about it, a bunch of people are like, hey, it doesn't work. Here's a link to a 17-part Blender tutorial that I followed to get it to work. And I saw that, and I was like, no. No thanks. But now, with thoughts of default Fortnite dances seared into my brain, I gotta do it. So maybe I'll give that another shot. I feel like I can do it. Because it doesn't need to be that good. I also tried Vroid Studio. It turns out that the reason that almost every Vroid Studio VTuber model looks really bad is because it is basically impossible to get anything good looking to come out of Vroid Studio. Because there's so few options and such limited ways of adding new stuff that it kind of all just ends up looking bad. And they all look bad in like the same way too. I mean, there's a couple that are good, but if you really, the other thing that I was thinking about doing is like one of those like Fiverr guys who's like, for $30, I will make you a VR chat model, because that's essentially the format that I need. So maybe I'll just pay someone so I can Fortnite dance. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. All right, let me see what Andrew posted in book club. Oh, what the fuck?